It is, I want to say my honor to, in fact, do this for the first time, but also moderating. Sorry about that. To introduce our speaker. Can you hear me? Does it make any difference? Okay, how about that? Okay, thank you. Mr. Joe Anthony, I'm going to read from the blurb because I do not really know this gentleman, and so I want to make sure I get it all right. The title of his presentation, or his conversation, is called Dangerous Trust. We will explore the roots of authority and defiance in UU and in our lives as a whole. Whom do we listen to, trust? To whom do we yield authority? When do we suspend our own understanding for someone else's, or do we ever? Joe Anthony was an English professor for 35 years. His 3 novels and 2 short story collections center on issues such as race, religion, and mountaintop removal. Wanted. Good Family is currently being used in a UK modern Kentucky history course. His novel In Progress, set in 1900 Lexington, is basically about thwarted ambition, the desire of blacks and women to live their lives to the fullest. And Mr. Anthony has requested that I read another piece from Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It was first published in February 20th, 2006, and revised in 2015, August. Trust is important, but it is also dangerous. It is important because it allows us to form relationships with people and to depend on them for love, for advice, for help with our plumbing or what have you, especially when we know that no outside force compels them to give us such things. But trust also involves the risk that people we trust will not pull through for us. For if there were some guarantee that they would pull through, then we would have no need to trust them. Thus, trust is also dangerous. What we risk while trusting is the loss of the things that we entrust to others, including our self-respect, perhaps, which can be shattered by the betrayal of our trust. Mr. Joe Anthony.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
Is that okay? Yeah. I was sitting back there with Barbara and David. I said, how many people I really know here? It's always lonely. I'm going to start with a poem of mine. It's called Green Tomatoes. Very appropriate to this season. And English professor stuff. This is from Dante's Inferno, and Virgil is the personification of reason as opposed to faith. It's called Green Tomatoes. The tomatoes are taking their time turning red. I monitor the garden like a hungry child hovering by his mother's stove. So much was promised, frets Virgil, reason's voice, losing faith in the lingering time before the angel of God appears. The angel of God always takes his time. His presence sensed by the hopeful, while yet a mere glow in the dark. They are the first to spot dawn's rosy fingers, the last to let the light leave, the quick to doubt despair. No matter. I pick one massive verdant fruit, lying helpless on the ground, already cracking at the base. I will hide it in a brown paper bag, and let its redness surprise me in a day or two, like a virgin with a child who doesn't quite remember the planting. Respect for for authority. I had a friend of mine asked me, well, what's that going to be about? And I said, well, I'm talking to you youths, so I'm not going to talk about defiance. That would close the Newcastle. They don't really know about defiance. Experience, said my favorite character in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, the Wife of Bath, is all the authority we need. And I'm going to show off, as Chaucer has her say, experienza, though non authority, we're in this world without an authority. Basically, she's saying will learn from experience and not go to authority. Respect for authority is not a popular idea in our world either. Our own experience, or the experience of others close to us, quite often trumps anything we've read. Primary knowledge is often the best. It's the raw material of knowledge. It's natural for us to distrust the authority of distant sources that may well be most interested in protecting and projecting their power. The wife's world was dominated by male clerical authority that viewed her at best as a joke and at worst as a degraded source of temptation. For her survival, for her dignity, she needed to reject their authority. As Unitarian Universalists, we have a long history of resisting and rejecting male clerical authorities. Indeed, many of our resistors have been those same male clerics. We have reluctantly and slowly, through many painful battles, increasingly granted authority to women and to African Americans. Always, we have put our own faith and our own individual search for truth primary. For many of us have fled churches where we're expected to yield our spiritual authority to something other than ourselves, our own autonomy to others, to a text, a pope, my case, Sister Mary Carolyn. Ironically, though Emerson left the Unitarian ministry because he felt the church too restrictive of his thought, we've become his spiritual descendants, self-reliant. I'm thinking of this now because of Donald Trump's reply to the question of whom he consulted, who his advisors were. He relies on himself, he said. He consulted mostly himself. That he had a pretty big brain. Like the wife, he did not need authority, outside sources. What he had learned through experience was good enough for him. Who knew Donald Trump was a Unitarian? But this self-reliance appeals to many of us. Perhaps it's in my admiration for the wife, he and his followers suspect an authority that is often used to ridicule and to sustain the power base of whatever elite is in place at the time. But if authority is to come mainly from ourselves or from our experience, even Donald Trump might concede that the biggest of our brains will run into walls higher than his envisioned Mexican one. Walls that only outside authority will allow us to transcend. I wonder, whom do we, Or since I'm writing this out of my own medium-sized brain, whom do I respect enough to yield authority to? The first person who comes to mind is my plumber, electrician, who knows my Victorian very well. My mechanic, too, is familiar with my old cars. I'm writing one right now, very old. And my roofer. When you own a Victorian, you have a resident roofer. All three men are deeply knowledgeable. They're also men of character, honest and modest. They advise me as to what is needed and what might be desirable. I listen to them. In the fields of their expertise, I give them deference. I am deferential to many of my friends also. My ideas on education, for example, and what needs to be done are deeply influenced by teachers I know and by volunteers who work with children. But others influence me whom I don't know, who write useful, thoughtful articles. My own experience as a teacher is valuable too, but I understand its limitations. As a teacher, I was open to suggestions. I think most teachers are. I believe others might be more knowledgeable. I yield them authority. Very early on, as an inspiring writer, I decided that certain poets and writers were the sources of all knowledge. Sometimes I was a bit too starstruck. Hemingway, for example, weighed on me and many other young males heavily. We edited our prose till it was sometimes reduced to grunts. Man grunts. I forgave Dostoevsky's chauvinism because I love Dostoevsky. I even poo-pooed T.S. Eliot's and E.E. Cummings' anti-Semitism. I forgave F. Scott Fitzgerald's casual racism as just a product of his time. I yielded too much authority to certain authors. I had to learn to love and yet withhold, to read the Bible of literature critically, to exult in certain passages, and to resist and reject others. I was fortunate to find a way to do that and still hold on to a sense of wonder at how profound and wonderful so many poets are. My R comes from my vague understanding of the marvelous beyond my ken, my deference to the authority of a poet's greater understanding and more profound feeling. Spiritually, I decided decades ago that I would not yield wholly to the authority of the church. The Catholic Church, that is, for me. I became a Unitarian Universalist, a church that almost demands that an individual take complete spiritual responsibility for oneself. Ironically, though, as I grow older, I find that I listen to others much more spiritually. My fellow UUs, priests, ministers, Paul Prather, Thomas Merton, my friend Jackie, Pope Francis. I even remember some nuns, finally. Sister John Mary's second grade Jeremiah against racism. Playground children have been using the N-word against our own black child. And that stays in my mind as a wonderful moral lesson. I yield spiritual authority to all sorts of people. I have become a kind of Catholic UU, more and more humble in my insights, more and more ready to concede that others might have a fuller understanding. It is the willingness to yield authority that I am talking about. The modesty that comes with the understanding that our own understanding is limited. That others might know more of what they are talking about in certain areas. It is the willingness to trust, some people wholly, some only, as my dad put it, after you cut the cards. If we are not willing to trust our plumbers, our friends, our poets, and our leaders, what world will we be left with? Our leaders. I left that for last. We must look very critically at our leaders. My trusted mechanic would never suggest work my car didn't need. He knows my budget. He would never let me drive an unsafe car. We all know politicians whom we couldn't say the same about. We have had so many politicians who have misused our trust that it is difficult to recover the mindset that allows for trust in a leader. We have retreated to a cynicism that we can easily justify. But is it a cynicism that prevents us from exploring what is possible? We need to exercise trust as a kind of reasoning faith. A faith that does not reject the Bible of hope because of certain misused passages in Leviticus. I will not and do not want to yield all my reasoning ability to a blind trust. But cynicism is too easy, too self-protective, too fearful, too limiting. We are not naives. Vietnam, Watergate, Iraq have taught us the dangers of allowing our leaders too much leeway. They say that generals are always fighting the last war and do not adapt to the new fight. We have learned to mistrust. We needed to learn that distrust. Unitarian Universalists have a long and proud tradition of defiance. We were the first Protestants to reject the idea of a Trinity. We have followed Emerson and Thoreau into our own minds and our own spiritual explorations. We know the joy of claiming our own autonomy. But perhaps we have become too distrustful of authority. Perhaps we are in danger of becoming too enamored of our own great brains. Can we relearn how to trust? Journey back to respect in an authority that is both justified and warranted. The wife of Bath was on a pilgrimage after all. In search of a sixth husband, but maybe something else too. Something perhaps beyond her own experience. Something that would liberate her, help her transcend, in Emerson's thought, the narrow confines of what she knew.